do. So I want to formally welcome everybody on behalf of Intown Jewish Academy to our brand new course called Decoding Talmud. This has been a long time in the making, always looking to get Talmud courses going. And we have with us a true Talmud scholar, Rabbi Jacobson, Rabbi Mendel Jacobson, who is going to be leading all of you in this experience into the wonderful sea of Talmud. That's an expression that's used, Yam Shel Talmud, the sea of Talmud, and you are in very capable hands. And so with that, I hand over the proverbial mic to Rabbi Jacobson. Take it away.
Right. Good evening. Thank you, Rabbi Solish. So just a little introduction about myself. My name is Rabbi Mendel Jacobson. I actually just moved to Atlanta in the beginning of August with my family of 4 children. And thank God we love it here. Very welcoming. We like the weather. We like the people. And we like the fact that we could find parking no matter what time of the day it is. So I have been learning Talmud for many years, thank God. And I've been focused on teaching Talmud the last 4 or 5 years in different settings. And it's really been an honor and a pleasure to be able to teach Talmud even more than learn it. Because when you teach it and you need to give it over, it helps you find different aspects that perhaps you didn't see when you yourself were learning it and being taught it. So one of the things that I found amazing is to start decoding the Talmud and not just listening and reading it and hearing it from others, but rather to start breaking it down and figuring out the processes, the norms, the expectation, like what to expect, what the logic behind it is, somewhat at least. It's a journey. And every time I think I got to level 1, I realized that I got to go all the way back. So it's a journey, which I'm glad to be able and honored to be able to share with you. And I hope you'll join me in this exciting journey that, although I'm many years into, is just the beginning for me as well. And it's always the beginning. So there's always a step further. There's always another realization, and I'm gonna finish with that. I'll stop with that, and I will get to the class. So I was thinking for today, we will start with the class being 1 hour. And although the Talmud is huge and there's a lot to discuss, we'll try staying on topic as much as possible. I'm sure it will be tempting to lead to a lot of other discussions because there's so many things that we just touch on to be able to get to the bigger picture, but we'll stay focused. And for those that want to take the conversations further, we'll try making that happen. So for today, we'll do the class for 1 hour, but then as the series continues, we'll see if we'll need to add in a few more minutes at the end of classes to do a little review, or to be able to add in the halachic aspect of it, or any other needs that we might have. So with that, I will start mine. I'll be sharing my screen here, and I will be starting with just a little, I think I just deleted what I needed. Oh, I did. Okay. I'll be starting with a short presentation. Just a quick, not to get this class itself, this little introduction that I'm about to give you. I spoke to Rabbi Solish. He said he gave it over in a 6-week series. So the point of this isn't to focus that much on this, is just to give us a quick background to help us, because I will reference back to it at times when discussing certain differences that we might see in the Mishnah or the Talmud, or how the Talmud works. I might just reference back to this idea. So I wanted to just go through a few quick pieces of information regarding the difference between Mishnah and Talmud. One thing, obviously, if you have a question, please feel comfortable to ask. I am always open to hear questions. And try answering them to the best of my ability. All right, so the Talmud, the what, the how, the why, and in all truth, the where as well. Is this gonna work? All right, so just to give a quick overview of just the Torah, the Mishnah, and the Talmud. So the Torah covers the era. If we're only looking at the 5 books of Moses, it covers the era of 1393 to 12 from the creation. From day 1. Actually, I don't even know why I did that. All right, but from day 1 until most. Yeah, that was a mistake. That was until the day that Moses passed. Till the day that Moses passed away, which was in 1273 BCE. So that is the Torah, the era that the Torah covers. So from year number 1 to 1273 BCE, the author was Moses transcribing the word of God. The basic design of it, and again, this class itself, this sheet right here could go on for years. And there's multiple books written about it, but I'm trying to keep it as short as possible. Point number 1 that's important, and I was trying to put focus primarily on the information that we need for the skills of Talmud, not to focus on the actual on the history of this. So the author is that the idea that Moses wrote what God said is a very necessary fact for understanding Talmud. The design is each letter is exact, and therefore in Talmud you will have multiple places that one letter might end up being a full discussion what could be learned from that. And if you learn things from one letter, it's very general. On one end, it's very exact, but even when it speaks about the mitzvot, when it speaks about different commandments, when it speaks about rules, it leaves a lot of place that needs to be added. A lot of information that needs to be included later. Number 3, it's meant to be written, meaning to say that is the Jewish book that was designed to be written. It was the Torah Shebechsav, the Torah that was written, and that was meant to be the only book that was originally set to be written. Just to add in, it's right, the 5 books. If you want to add in, there's the 5 books of Moses. If you want to add in the Tanakh, so then it's really 24 books. And as I wrote in the era covered, then it will go all the way, the Tanakh, including the story of Esther, goes all the way till around 35, till the year 355 BCE. So that's the era covered in Tanakh. Again, it's a pretty loose history class, but this is just, all right, the Mishnah. Mishnah means the teachings. That started shortly before a short period before the destruction. Well, the Mishnah was written in the year 219 CE, which it was compiled by Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. I'm using the word carefully, compiled, and he compiled the teachings of the Tanoim, which means the teachers. And the era of the Tanoim start in a little bit before the destruction of the Second Temple. So that's 32 BCE, and continued on through the life of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, which was 219 BCE. Again, the general breakdown of that is that there's 8 generations of the Tanoim. Some of the famous ones were Hillel, Shammai, and it was their job. They're the primary. Well, the Tanoim were teachers. They were teaching the halachic aspects of Jewish life. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, at a later point, he gathered that information so we could have it in one place, and we shouldn't lose the oral Torah, the Torah that was been given from generation to generation, from teacher to student. The design of the Mishnah is precise but loose. What I mean to say with that, it is very precise. Every word is thought out, every word is planned, but at the same time, it's very loose because, every word is 100% important. However, there's a lot of place and there's a lot of missing information intentionally from the actual Mishnah. It's not meant to be the end point. it was written in a way. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi compiled it primarily, as I pointed out in point 2, as a way to be remembered, because Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was concerned as the Jews were starting to have a more, well, not starting, we're having a more, realized that the troubles of the Jews was creating a situation where teaching from teacher to student was not going to be the best way of law being continued, because there were many times that laws couldn't even be figured out, because as the Sanhedrin was finally, as the Jewish court systems were finally being as the Jews were getting comfortable enough in different eras of those years, were finally getting comfortable enough to be able to go through all those laws and to document it in an organized way, and to be able to continue that tradition of teaching Torah from teacher to student was becoming very difficult, because the lack of stability that the Jewish people were having as a nation. So he realized that although it wasn't the plan, the right thing to be able to continue the Torah is to be able to write it down. So it's meant to include as much as possible, but at the same time, it's supposed to lead us to greater discussion to be able to figure out what was included in that, because they just wouldn't be able to carry the Talmud with them every time they had to travel from location to location. Because the Mishnah is primarily focused on the halachic aspects of Judaism. And there are some cases, like in just coming to my mind when it comes to the tractate about Sukkot and the tractate about Passover. So then I'll also have some things included regarding how things were in the temple. But primarily your average Mishnah covers Jewish law. And just to put it there, there's 6 books. Well, there's much more books. There's the six orders, and each one of those, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Hanasi means the prince. The Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi Yehuda the prince, he organized it in 6 orders to be able to categorize each one, which again will quickly give you a input of which, once you know what tractate it is and what order is in, you know which topic it is discussing. I'm just going to go back to point 2. And this all has to do, I'm focusing on the information that is helpful for Gemara learning. When he wrote the Mishnah in a way that it should be remembered, and therefore he sometimes did some things that perhaps today we wouldn't write it in such a way. So there's times where the Talmud goes back and asks, why did he use this order of the Mishnah? And we respond because his goal was for it to be, because he was linking pieces of information. So like this, the memory just goes from topic, and in the same topic will go on. Or sometimes when he says a law, he might change the order from one Mishnah to the next Mishnah. And again, the Talmud will ask why, and the reason will be is because once he was using his understanding of how people would remember it best. Somebody have a question? Right. So that is just a bit. And again, the fact that it was written in so short gives us so much place and the necessity to be able to go through so much of it. All right. The Talmud era, the era of the Gemara, is a 3-century era of around 200 to 500. 200 to 500 CE. It was compiled by Rav Ashi and Ravina. Rav Ashi usually references to the rabbis of Bavel and this era of the Amoraim. The Amoraim is all the rabbis that are included after the era of the Tanoim, the era of the Mishnah. They're called Amoraim. That meaning Amoraim means those that say. Rav Ashi and Ravina were from the final rabbis of the era of the Amoraim, and they compiled the different discussions that occurred throughout those 300 years regarding the Mishnah. And interestingly, and again, this is all for the sake of understanding the Gemara, it wasn't in a very organized way. Meaning to say, the discussions could have been two conversations happening in two different parts, in two different yeshivas of Bavel. And eventually Rabbeinu and Rav Ashi gathered those two and they successfully made it into a fascinating book. And there are some discussions that were in a yeshiva, some discussions were just two rabbis meeting in the street and getting into a great conversation like we have when we meet our friends. So they would get into conversations about something that we're studying. And therefore, there's in the Talmud, you have, they asked him, he asked them, he asked him, he was wondering about that. So that is, all right. So that is that. And when it comes to the Talmud, there is no topic untouched, unlike Mishnah, which is primarily halachic. When it comes to the Talmud, it goes through everything. It goes through who the author is. It goes through the history of it. It could have what's called agadata, which is just sayings of the Talmud, which seem to be stories, history, and all that could be included in that. Obviously, one piece just important, although no topic is untouched, every topic is important. So the Talmud might get into a discussion, who is the author of this Mishnah, which we might not be 100% sure even later on why that was so important, but it was important because they were seeking the truth. They were trying to figure out where this was coming from. It wasn't about the end of the conversation. It wasn't about this is the conclusion. It was about the wonder, the thinking, the debating, the analyzing, the discussing what was going on. So there are most Gemaras, 90% of the Talmud does finish off with a conclusion, but there are places where it's sort of left to hang, the concepts and the ideas are sort of left as they are. And that could be because the discussion was never finalized, or Rabbeinu or Rav Ashi never got that piece of information, because again, it wasn't like today where the rabbis had their Instagram pages or Twitters and start twittering out. We just came to a conclusion that no one did before. Information had to go from rabbi to rabbi, and then Rabbeinu and Rav Ashi tried gathering all those notes and compiled the Talmud with it. So that is just a general information. And this, I wanted to bring up these things because these ideas of the Mishnah being exact, precise, but leaving place to analyze and to interpret is important. The Mishnah mainly deals with halacha. Gemara could go off topic, could go from one topic to the next topic, because again, it was just discussion. It was debate. It was people seeking the truth and just trying to figure out what and why on any given topic. All right, that is more of a general intro for the Talmud in general. Now I'm going to go through just a short intro, and this is really every time you learn the Talmud, there is when you open up any tractate, there is sort of a unspoken expectation that there are certain pieces of information that you know before you open that Talmud. The way I figure out what it is not because I'm such a great Torah scholar, is because I read the Talmud and then I go back and say, well, these were the pieces of information that I want to say. I'm just going to point out one thing. I'm going to open up the Talmud. It's not a book. It's not a rule that's written anywhere, I think. But if you look at a Talmud, not very clear clear, but the first page, this is the first page of the Talmud. It always starts with daf beis. Daf beis. You know, let me open up I'll just share a page that I have. So give me a second. I realized that wouldn't be. Let me just. It comes to. Let me open up another page. I'm just going to show this. When you open up a Talmud, the first page will always be daf beis. And they say the reason is because beis equals number 2. And I'm gonna pick up this. I use this website a lot. The Merkava, great website. Let's say even the tractate that we're going to be learning. So this will be the first page. If you look here at the, I can't highlight it, but where my mouse says you have a beis, that is the first page. And they say the reason is because Talmud is always beis, is always second. So there's a lot of nice, cute things to say about that. Some say because the first thing is always Avos Yisrael, is always loving a fellow as yourself. But one of the more basic and one related to the Talmud is that whenever you're opening up a page in Talmud, there is a unspoken expectation that you know something about it. So just before, just pieces of information that are needed for this section that we're going to be studying is two general pieces of information that like sort of is expected that you see from all the commentaries and from the Mishnah itself that it is known. And again, this chart itself is pages and pages of the Talmud, but we're just going to try keeping it clear like this. We could keeping it just for what it is, although sometimes that's difficult because there's a lot of good discussions about this. That's why there's pages of Talmud. So just in general, the Torah labels 4 different types of watchmen. In Hebrew, they're called a Shomer. And the idea is that you are responsible for somebody else's objects. And the verses sort of split it up into 4 different situations. I made it 3 because 2 of them, although they're very different in form of getting the responsibility, the actual responsibility you have towards the object ends up being the same. So I broke it down into 3. So the four types of, before we go to the details, the 4 types of watchmen that there is a Shomer Chinam, a free watchman or a unpaid watchman, a watchman that is watching something simply because I was asked to. So my friend comes to me and asks me, could you please do house watching or dog watching or watch my car for me or my laptop, anything along those lines. I know with my children, there's always unpaid watchmen going on. Could you please watch my toys? And you do it just because. So that's a Shomer Chinam. So a Shomer Chinam, a unpaid watchman, is a person that is having the least pleasure from this interaction. The whole pleasure is to the person depositing it. Then the second type of Shomer is a Shomer Sachar, a paid watchman, where you get paid to watch somebody's object for him. So in the situation of a house sitter, but you're actually paying them to watch your house. Just while we're at it, that you're getting paid to watch, not that you could use it. That already has its own category. If I give it to you to watch, but I let you use it, that is its own. That's again a big discussion, but a Shomer Sachar, but it has a totally different set of rules because you're also allowed to use it. So a Shomer Sachar is a paid watchman, which automatically now there's 2 people having pleasure. The depositor is having pleasure because it's being watched for him, but I am having pleasure because I got paid to watch. Then together with that, in the category, or different categories, but same set of rules, is you have a Soichar, one that rents an object. So one that rents an object, it's also it's a mutual benefit. I'm benefiting that I could use your object that I don't have without renting it, and you're benefiting that I'm paying for it. So I am leasing an apartment, or you're benefiting that I'm paying you, and I'm benefiting that I have this house. Right? So that's a socher, but again, I put it in the same category. So Shomer Sachar, a paid watchman, and a socher, and a renter, I put in the same category because they're both a mutual and joined they have a mutual benefit, and therefore they have a mutual responsibility. Then you have the opposite of a shomer chinam, a unpaid watchman, is a shoyel, one that borrows something. So one that borrows something, the pleasure is all to the one that borrows it. The person that's lending it, it doesn't have any pleasure besides if they enjoy having stress, and they're wondering if they're going to get back their object the way they gave it. So that is a shoel, a renter. So although we're not, perhaps in the first page, we're not going to see that much of it, but it is sort of the underlining information that there's an expectation to know. Just to go through this very quickly, a shomer chinam, which has a shomer chinam, unpaid watchman, which the pleasures all to the depositor, he will only need to pay in a case if he was negligent. So just a quick example is if I borrow a car, if I borrow a car from you and I leave it running on the street, that's negligent. So although I'm not being paid to watch your object, but once I agree to watch your object, there's some sense of responsibility that I took upon myself. So in the case of negligence, you would have to pay anything but that. If it was stolen or lost, he swears, and we'll get to that shortly. We'll get to that. He needs to swear that he wasn't negligent, and he won't need to pay. The same thing is if it was onus, if it was robbed from him, if it was forced from him, he would swear that he wasn't negligent. He would swear that that's really the situation, and he does not need to pay. And the same thing is if, well, this rule doesn't apply, but if it died while working, meaning if it had a natural death, so if you gave me your car to watch, I left it in my garage, took care of it, locked my garage, and you came back and your car is dead. So then I have no responsibility at all. So that is a shomer chinam. Again, the only thing you would have to pay for if he was negligent. A shomer sachar, a paid watchman or a socher, one that rents, he would need to pay if he was negligent, or he would need to pay if the object was stolen or lost. Lost in this situation, just again, there's pages of the Talmud discussing it, but lost primarily means that stolen means that he took care of it, but not enough for the norm, and he didn't hide it in a way that was knowing that people that would steal would interact like that. So just a quick example, the Talmud goes through a whole discussion. If you're hiding money in your wall, certain places, in certain cities, they used to go around and knock on the wall, and they were able to see if there was money hidden there. So as long as you did it in the place which they expected for there to be money there, if you're a paid watchman or you were a renter, that would not be good enough, right? So I was speaking to somebody, and this might be a very practical example. Is if you're living in an area, and I'm coming from Brooklyn, so don't mind this example, where it's a common thing that your car gets checked to make sure that you didn't leave any valuables there. And if you did, they make sure to teach you the lesson that it's not, and that you shouldn't leave your valuables in your car. So interestingly, in a case of a renter, if you're living in such an area, it might be better for you to leave your door unlocked than locking your car. And I'm not putting this as halachic, I'm just giving this food for the thought. If you're living in an area where people will break a window to check if you have anything valuable in your car, it might be better watching if you leave your door unlocked and you just make sure that there's nothing of value in there. So that's just a thought that, so this is where stolen and lost is again, its own study, but a paid watchman, a shomer sachar, or a renter would need to pay would need to pay. However, if it was forced for him, and this would just be the basic example the Talmud gives for a ones, for being forced from him, is, well, the example that the Talmud gives is if you're watching sheep and lions came. So that's not called lost, that's called ones, it was forced from you. So in such a situation, we tell you, look, we're not expecting you to endanger your life or your situation to protect that person's thing, and therefore you would have to swear that that's what happened and you would not need to pay. A renter, obviously, if you're using it right in the right way and you're renting it, so I rent a car from you and it breaks down midway, it's not my responsibility to get it back for you as long as I was using it in its natural, in its planned way, in its natural way. The Talmud gives an example. If I rent a cow from you, an ox from you, and I tell you I'm traveling 10 miles and you used it 11, so the first 10, if it dies, I don't have to pay you if I'm the renter. If I took it 11th mile, then I would have to pay. The same thing is, the Gemara takes into discussion the different altitudes. So if I told you I'm going to the valley and instead I took the animal up a hill, similarly, that would change from negligent to using in its natural state. So that is regarding the Shomer. Sachar and Shoel, a borrower will need to pay. If he was negligent, for sure he's got to pay. If it was lost or stolen, he's got to pay. If it was forced from him, ones, he's got to pay. The one thing he doesn't have to pay is if I borrowed a car from you and I told you, I'm going to pick up something 3 miles away, and a mile and a half in, it died, and I communicated with you what I'm borrowing the car for. So then I turn to you and say, I told you so. So I wouldn't have to pay. And again, that would only fit if it's you're using it in its prohibited and planned way. So that is just general information that you should be aware about before going into this thing. Here's one more piece of information that I would like to share. I would need to minimize this, which is just a general rule that exists in the Talmud. So over here, I have this verse over here. I only have it in Hebrew, but and this is really going to be the big discussion of our Mishnah. Im himatze timatze biyado. If it's speaking about a stolen object, it comes from Shemot, from Exodus 22:3. If an object will be found in his hand, whether it's an ox, whether it's a cow, ox, whether it's a donkey, if it's living, you got to pay double. In the Talmud term of halacha, it's called kofel. You got to pay double. So kofel is a word we'll be using a lot throughout this, at least the beginning part of this journey. Okay, so the general information is the 4 watchmen and the idea that you pay double. I just want to do one just quick a little. I want to get to the actual Mishnah, but just want to jump into one little over here, just the way the page of Talmud works. So in on the beginning of the page, in the middle, in the left corner, you have Lamed Daled. That will tell you the page that it's on. It's called the daf. And just I might suggest that if you guys want to write down some of these general pieces of information, and I'll share which ones are very key important for every time you open up a new Gemara. So we have something called a daf, the page. So if you're using Merkava, you got the little where the mouse is now. You got it all. You got it planned for you. You have the 34A, which means daf. We'll get to the A part in a moment. But if you don't have the Merkava, or you're not using a Gemara that has the English, so daf, it's usually spelled D-A-F, or in Hebrew it's daf, dalid, final fei. So that will always be on the outside page, on the outside of the page. So it's not on the right or the left. It's always on the outside of the page. So the book goes it's a book. So on the outer page, you'll always have which page it's on. Now, so that is the page that's called daf. Together with that, the next very reference to whenever using Talmud is the amud, the side, because it goes lamed daled amud aleph, page lamed daled, amud side A. So over here you have daf lamed daled with no dot, or if you have one dot, that would mean that it's page 34, side 1. Side 1. And I'll throughout over the next few classes, I'll constantly bring just one or two examples of this just so we see it more often, just a reminder. So again, daf is the page. So you have that on the outside of the page on top. And then you have or one dot or no dot will mean side amud aleph, or if it has two dots, it's amud bay's second side. Again, if you use the Merkava, you got it on the inside of the page right here. Just while we're here, the name of the tractate will always be, every page of Gemara will have this header. It's really 3 separate headers. You have the name of the tractate is right here, Baba Metzia, and that's whether you're on the inside page or the outside page, you're always going to have it in this order. This order is always going to be the order. So Baba Metzia, on the left-hand side of facing you will always be the name of the tractate. And again, and that's how you'll know what tractate it is. In the middle, you have the number of the chapter. And this is actually not referenced to very often throughout Talmud, but it's there. So it's worth knowing what it is. The commentaries sometimes will tell you, as it's brought in the tractate, Baba Metzia, the 3rd chapter. Usually they're a little kinder than that, and they actually tell you the page number, especially in the newer prints that were revised and added. So here you have on the left, you have the name of the tractate. In the middle, you have the number of the chapter, and on the right-hand side, you have the name of the perek. So we will be studying perek hamafkid, which means the one that deposits, and that will always be on the right-hand side of the top of any given page in Talmud. And again, next week, just in the beginning of class, I'll give a few more examples just to see it there. While we're at it, the inside of the page, meaning, well, right here in the middle, that's the actual Talmud. It's obviously much larger than this. That is the Talmud. On the right-hand side, well, not the right-hand side, on the inside of the page. So when the book is open in front of you, the inside of the page is always the commentary Rashi, and the outside is always the commentary Tosfos. And again, we will learn a few of the Rashis throughout this series to give us a taste of what they're there for, and also to help us identify where they are. So just again, quickly, you got the page number, which is called the daf. The amud, you need to no serious investigation, but the amud is, or if there's no dot, or if there's one dot, that means amud means side A, and if there's 2 dots, it usually means it's amud base. And that's the common way of referencing to the Talmud is, hey, I'm learning daf lamed daled. We're going to be learning daf lamed gimel actually, but I took a picture of daf lamed daled amud aleph. Okay, so that is just, and then while we're at it, I just wanted to give one more example of what a first page of a perek looks like. Here you have, this means when you see these words, Hadron Alecha El Metzias, it's big letters in the middle. I should really give a better example, but it's usually in the middle of a page. You'll just see those words. It means it's the end of previous chapter. And here we have, well, this Talmud doesn't, but a lot of the next ones, the Mishnah will start, and that means it's a new chapter starting. And here, if you just look here, the Gimel Mem means, or the end of those 2 dots, Gimel Mem means it's the end of the Mishnah, and we'll be starting the Gemara. Right? So I think we're good with that. And again, we'll just quickly give throughout the series, I'll just give quick references to them, or when we're learning a Talmud, I'll reference back to it and just go through that basic skill again, and I just lost my page. Okay. Now we're going to go to our actual Mishnah. We're ready? So our Mishnah is, we're going to be studying Perek HaMafkid, which is the Perek of the depositor. And we're going to hopefully cover what? We'll cover the Mishnah today. And the next week we'll get into the Gemara of it. So I personally use this website called the Merkava. And again, if encouraged, the best way of learning Talmud is to review it. You have, I'll put it into the chat for those that want to. I'm going to put it, let me just put that into the chat. Sorry. I'm just going to put that link in. It's a very helpful website if you want to get the experience of learning out of the Talmud and having that nice translation on the bottom. So it color codes it for you. And then, I mean, there's different aspects, but you just click on a few words. It will break down the sentence for you. And then right there on bottom, you got the translation. So I put that in the chat. So, and again, reviewing it is always good. So this Mishnah is going to be discussing a certain aspect of the responsibilities that, well, not the responsibilities. This Mishnah again assumes you know your responsibility as a watchman. And once you know that, the Mishnah has got to deal with a new situation, and this is how it goes. Hamafkid etzel chavero, one who deposits by his friend. And just my students asked me this, and I thought it was nice. The Talmud and Jewish law many times uses chavero no matter who it's talking about, because there's a nice lesson there. Just be loving. Hamafked etzel chavero, one who deposits by his friend. Behema o kalim, an animal or a vessel. Vinignuvu, they were stolen. O sha'avdu, or they were lost. So you gave me a product, and you come back to me and you go, okay, time to return. And I tell you, I'm sorry, Adam, it was stolen. Or I go back and just go back to that example in the Talmud. I go back to that place in the wall and I check for the money's gone. It's lost. Now, this is where the Mishnah is dealing with primarily these four words. Shilem v'lo ratza lishava. The watchman paid and he did not want to swear. So he was able to swear and say, so let's just go back. We're talking about let's say we're talking about an unpaid watchman. And an unpaid watchman, what would be the rule if it was lost or stolen? Lost or stolen, unpaid watchman. He could swear that he wasn't. Say what? Did we have an answer there?
He swears and doesn't pay.
Excellent, thank you. He swears and he doesn't pay. What does he need to swear? He needs to swear that he wasn't negligent and that that's actually what happened. Or he needs to swear that he's not keeping it in his backyard because he found out that it's a good object and he was looking for this object and Amazon just ran out of that product and he found it easier to keep it, pay you, right? So he needs to swear. And he comes to you and he says, I don't want to swear, I want to pay. Now, no problem. Torah lets you pay whenever you want to pay. There's no debate. You want to pay. No problem. You paid. I gave the depositor his money. Shaharei Amru. What's unique about the situation is we had a rule. Shomer chinam nishba v'yotze, unpaid watchman could swear and go away and leave, meaning he leaves the responsibility. He leaves the financial transaction, the financial relationship that there is between the two, he walks away from. So the moment the unpaid watchman swears that he wasn't negligent, that's it. But this unpaid watchman decided to take a different route. Instead of swearing, he decided, I am paying for your object. And that could be for multiple reasons. It could be because he's not 100% sure that he wasn't negligent. It could be just because back in the olden days, when they would make you swear, it was a scary thing. They would take you to court and dress you. They would darken the room. They would turn on candles. They would open up the Torah ark. You would have to hold the Torah. The rabbis would wear their talesim, their swallows over, their white. They would dress in white. It was a pretty scary situation, and they would warn you. So this guy decides, you know what, I'm paying. I don't want. It's not worth the hassle. I have a family friend, which is thank God a successful businessman, and he has a policy, to good or to bad, and I'll leave this for the businessmen to debate, but he has a general policy that as long as the argument is worth less than a certain amount of money, he pays. Not worth it. I'm not going to court. I'm not debating you. Take your money and let's take your money. It's the last time we're talking, but take your money, right? So let's say this Mishnah happens to him. I turn to this guy and I say, Shaya, please watch my car. And I come back to him and I say, where's my car? And he goes, just take your money and walk away, right? So this guy decided, instead of swearing, instead of going to court, instead of having your name in the newspapers that you're in court, and then somebody Googles your name and finds that there was a court case between you and somebody else, and doesn't have the patience to read the whole court, Shomer, whatever, the guy decides he's swearing. He's paying. Now, what gets tricky is, not tricky, Nimtza Haganav. The thief is found. We found a Ganav. We found the person that stole the object. Now, what happens? What's the rule if somebody steals something and you find him? How much does he need to pay? He's got to pay double. He's got to pay kofel. So here we have a situation. The depositor got his money back on my free will because I was able to swear, and instead I gave him the money. But now we have somebody that's obligated to pay double the object. Mishalim, so the rule is, if you found him, Mishalim Tashlumi Kofel, he has to pay the payment of double. Side rule, and again, this itself is its own topic, Tavach u'machar. If when it was stolen, it was slaughtered or sold, so then the rule is Mishalim Tashlumi Arba v'chamisha. The one who stole it needs to pay a payment of 4 or 5 times. Again, it seems, again, these words over here have pages of Talmud written about it, of why are we responsible, what's the reason behind it, but the general rule is if it was slaughtered or if it was sold. So somebody stole. Sorry, do we have a question there? Do we have a question? Yeah, sorry. Tavach u'machar, if it was stolen or it was cooked, so then the person who stole it needs to pay 4 or 5. But again, just to generalize it without getting into the details of why, because that's not the track that we're studying. So there's a fee involved over here. There's extra payment that needs to be made. Lemi mishalim. To who does he pay? He needs to pay the double. He needs to pay 4 or 5. To who? Does he pay to the depositor because his object was stolen? Or does he pay to the watchman because the watchman already paid the depositor for his object? Mishalim lemi shapikadon itzlo. Who does he pay? He pays lemi, to whom shapikadon itzlo, that the depositor was by the watchman. And the reason for that is because as a watchman, I'm just using myself as an example, I paid you for your object already. So now the object becomes mine. That's what this Mishnah is teaching us. The Mishnah is teaching us, you didn't have to pay. You could have sworn, you could have left the person that deposited the object to you at a loss. You paid him for it. He sort of gave you the right, not sort of, he gave you the rights to that object and any benefit that might come from it later. And in this case, you hit gold. The object was found. So A, you get your object back. So you get the money of what you laid out back. But over here, you also ended up with the double. You ended up with any financial rights that might come from it.
Okay, so I'm confused. So let me see if I understood what you just said.
Thank you. Yeah.
So you're saying that if you asked me to watch your rototiller and you came to get it and I just said, hey, I don't want any issues. Let me just pay you for your rototiller. Move on. We moved on. So now I have the rights to the rototiller. And then the Atlanta police come and they knock at my door and they say, hey, we found this guy that was pawning off this rototiller that you were watching. So I get to keep the rototiller. Is that what you're saying?
I get to keep it and get the double that the guy that stole it needs to pay.
Got it. Okay, now I understand. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
And in a situation where you're paying 4 or 5 times, you pay that as well. So that is the first part of the Mishnah. Okay. Second part, and again, what before we go down again, this is also key words for whenever learning Mishnah. And again, important for when you're learning the Mishnah, you could get away without using this word that I'm about to use. But when you're learning Talmud, you got to get this. This is an important word. When we have 2 cases in a Mishnah, and I'm going to focus on 2 because most Mishnahs don't have 3. There are a few, and I'll mention it later. We have a Reisha, a head, a starter, and a seifa, a end. So those few lines were the Reisha of the Mishnah, the first case of the Mishnah. And the Talmud will use that later on and try saying, well, we could imply from the Reisha of the Mishnah. So from the first case of the Mishnah, again, that's Reisha, head. So that here we have one case that's a Reisha. And now we're about to go to the seifa of the Mishnah, which seifa is similar to the word sof, the end, right? As Reisha is similar to the word rosh, head, beginning, start. And we have a seifa, which is similar to the word sof, which is end. Now, when it comes to the Talmud, there are, if you're using the Art Scroll, if you're using Steinsaltz, or you're using Sefaria, but in a regular Mishnah, you'll open up, it won't say clearly the Reisha or the Seifa. But we use our reading skills and to say, well, this is one case, and here we'll have a second case. Just to put it out there, not to focus on it that much, when there's 3 cases, you have the Reisha, the Mitziusa, the middle one, and Seifa, which is the end. But again, not very common. And even when it does happen, the Talmud usually doesn't reference to all 3 because it's so unique. But Reisha and Seifa constantly comes up in the Talmud. If you pay attention to the Reisha, to the head, it implies one thing. And perhaps we'll get there by class number 4 because this Gemara, this section, this concept that we're going to discuss does touch on that. Case number 2. So the Seifa of our Mishnah. Nishba v'lo ratza l'shalem. What happens if he swore and he didn't want to pay? Right? So again, going back, an unpaid watchman, the object was stolen. I come to you and I say, where's the object? They say, I'm very sorry, it was lost, it was stolen. You come, okay, come with me to court, swear for it. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I am going to swear for this. I'm not giving you a penny. Sorry, I'm going to go with exactly what's expected. I'm going to swear. So here's a case of Nishba. He swore v'lo ratza l'shalem. He doesn't want to pay. Nimtza haganev. If the thief is stolen, if the thief is found, mishalim tashlumi kaifal, he pays double. Similar rule, tabach u'machar. If when it was stolen, it was slaughtered or sold, mishalim tashlumi arba v'chamisha. The one who stole it pays pays 4 or 5 times. Similar rule, but lemim mishalem, to who does he pay? The bala pikadon, to the owner, to the master of the depositor, the one who deposited it. Why? Simple. Because it's his object. Whose object was stolen? The one who deposited. So A deposited something by the watchman. The watchman has no rights to it. Yes, he got away from paying for it, but he never did anything to receive that object. Okay. So here we have that Mishnah, and I would like to finish the end of class with just reading it, what I call a power review, because that's just the best way of learning Talmud, is just reviewing it over and over. But before we go there, I want to take just one aspect of this Mishnah and just to take it out of its for what it is. Not that there's anything wrong with the Mishnah itself, but I think this is one of the places in the Talmud that could have a very strong implication on a lot of business dealings that we do today. And the reason for that is a lot of the discussions that there are in Talmud about buying and selling things are about actual objects. Over here, I'm seeing, and it's very clear, that there's a discussion about buying financial rights without the object being there. Without the object being an actual product that I'm giving over to you. So if you sell me your home, or I buy a home and then it goes up in value, the home is my home. So it went up in value. What went up in value? My home went up in value. So you owned it a year ago. Sounds fantastic and good for me. You know, I hope that you could congratulate me for buying it at the right time. And you know, we had a clear-cut buy and sell thing. I buy a cow, somebody buys a cow from somebody, and the cow has a baby. Yeah, I bought the cow and then it had a baby. You sold me a cow that could have babies. Over here is where we're dealing with something where, at least from the Mishnah's perspective, you sold me the rights to make money off it, even though at no moment was the cow given over to me. So if I'm the watchman and somebody deposited something by me, when I paid for it, he didn't give me the actual cow in my hand. He gave me an idea of a cow, which at that point might have already been in a meat soup, or it might have already been grilled or sold to some other farmer. And there's no way of me getting it back. And our Mishnah is telling us that what? That the financial rights and of this object, of this product, belong to me because of a unofficial business transaction that we did. I didn't even tell you, the Shomer, the watchman, doesn't even say, I am buying the product from you. All he's saying is, take the money for your product. And this Mishnah is giving us a very clear direction that, at least in some cases, that is a totally fine business deal, because even though you're selling not even though, you could sell the financial rights of something, even though there isn't the actual product that is changing hands from mine to yours. I just found that pretty interesting, and how our Mishnah, which was written, right, 219, the year 219, will help us, give us some insight into doing business dealings in our days, where perhaps where you're selling, or you're giving over rights and financial rights. Right? It is 9 o'clock, and I'm looking forward to start next class with the actual inside the Gemara. For those that want to stay on, no offense if you don't. I'm just going to do a quick power review. I'll just read the Mishnah, translate it twice, and then we'll continue. And then we'll see you next week. So I'm just going to go through that quickly. Again, we're doing tractate. I'm just going to go up to the top of the page. We're doing tractate Baba Metzia. While over here, because it's the top of the page, is Elo Metzias. So but we're not doing Gimel Tziyut. We're doing Lamed Gimel Amud Beis, Lamed Daf Lamed Gimel, page Lamed Gimel Amud Beis, side number 2. So Hamafked Eitz Chavere, one who deposited by his friend, Behema Kalim, an animal or vessels. Vinignuvu Osha Avdu, they were stolen or they were lost. Shilem B'lei Ratzali Shava, he swore, he paid and he didn't want to swear. The watchman paid and he didn't want to swear. Sharei Amru, for behold, they said regarding a watchman, Shomer Chinam Nishba B'yotze, an unpaid watchman could swear and leave the financial responsibility. Nimtza Ganev, the thief is found, Mishalim Tashlume Kaifel, he pays, the one who stole it pays the payment of double. Tabachum Machar, if he slaughtered it or he sold it, Mishalim Tashlume Arba V'chamisha, he pays the payment of 4 or 5. Limi Mishalim, to who does he pay? Lemisha Pikadon Etzlo, to whom the deposit is by. So to the watchman. That is the ratio of the Mishnah, the beginning of the Mishnah. The seifa of the Mishnah is, the end of the Mishnah is, Nishpa v'lo ratza l'shalem. What happens if the watchman swears and he doesn't want to pay? Nimtza ganev, the one that stole it was found, mishalim tashlumi kaifel. He pays the payment of double. Tavach umachar, if he slaughtered it or he sold it. The person who slaughtered or sold it, mishalim tashlumi arba v'chamisha, he would pay the payments of 4 or 5. To whom does he pay? The Baal HaPikadon, to the owner of the deposit, the one who deposited. I'm going to do that one more time. Hamafked Eitz Chavera, one who deposits by his friend. And here we go. Behema, Kalim, animals or vessels. Vinignevu Osha Avdu. They were lost or they were stolen. Shilim v'lei ratzah l'shava. He swore, he paid and he didn't want to. He paid and he didn't want to swear. So this the watchman pays. Sharei Amrus, because behold, they said. Shomer Chinam Nishba B'yotze, a unpaid watchman could swear and leave without paying, meaning he leaves the financial responsibility. Nimtza Ganev, the one that was stolen was found, Mishalim Tashlume Kaifel. He would pay, he needs to pay the payment of double, Tavach Umachar, if he cooked it or he sold it, Mishalim Tashlume Arba V'chamisha, he pays the payment of 4 or 5. The Mi Mishalim, 2 does he pay? The Misha Pikadon Etzlai, to who the deposit is by. That's the ratio of the Mishnah. The seif of the Mishnah, the end of the Mishnah is Nishpa v'lei ratzah l'shalem. If he swears and he doesn't want to pay, Nimtza Ganev, the one that was stolen is found. Mishalim Tashlumi Kaifel, he pays the payment of double. Tavach umachar, if it was cooked or it was cooked. Tavach umachar was cooked or it was stolen. Mishalim Tashlumi Arba V'chamisha, he would pay the payments of 4 or 5. So 4 or 5 times. The mi mishalim, to whom does he pay? Lebala pikadon, to the master, to the owner of the deposit. So my students labeled it the depositor. That's their right. So that here we have a Mishnah. So just a quick review of what we discussed today. We just we opened up the Mishnah, and we just how to navigate at least the beginning of a conversation, how to navigate the page of the Talmud, the end of a chapter we had over here, and then we have a ratio of our Mishnah. We have a seif of the Mishnah. And the topic at hand is, could you buy? Well, the topic is, what's the rule if somebody deposits a product and it gets stolen, and then it's found? So who gets the financial rights? The outer box discussion that the Mishnah leads us into is, could you buy financial rights without the object being at hand? All right. It was a real pleasure. If you have any questions, I will be around for a few minutes, and we'll continue next week, God willing.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Rabbi
Jacobson,
Yes.
the concept of watchman, is that just around this Mishnah, or are we going to see it in other situations? Talmud.
It's going to come up again in this series. I think it's going to come up primarily more, probably in class 4, I hope. But it's all over Talmud. It's all over this tractate. It comes up. This idea of watchman is an extremely popular discussion that exists throughout this section of Talmud. We don't really need to know for the next 3 classes for sure. For the next 2 classes for sure, I would even say Perhaps for this series, we might not even need to know the exact details of what they're responsible for and whatnot. But it was just, it's just the underlining piece of information that from all the commentaries and from the actual page of Talmud, there's that expectation that it's somewhat, at least, not even if you don't, not to know it perfectly, but just to know that they exist. I hope that answers. All right.
Rabbi Jacobson, a quick question. So the 3 watchmen you listed were the unpaid watchman, paid watchman, and then renter?
So I listed the renter here. I'm just going to pull up that page. I'm sharing screen, right? So you have it here. No, wrong slide. So I labeled it the paid watchman, well, the unpaid watchman, the paid watchman, together with the renter, even though they're two different, they're coming from 2 different angles. I just put them together because they have similar rules in reality, because they're both similar, that it's a mutual benefit. So even like when you learn, even throughout the Talmud, it does. I did it also because the Talmud does it like that. The Talmud says that there's 4, but then breaks down the rules into 3.
And the third one?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Shoel is a borrower.
Borrower. Thank you.
Somebody that borrows. Yeah.
Rabbi Jacobson, I have a question.
Sure.
So in the case where if the watchman wants to pay, what if the depositor doesn't want to take the money and would rather like keep on financial rights in case the item is found later?
Fantastic question. Fantastic question. Our series is not going to touch on that directly, but based on what hopefully will be class 3 or 4, we'll see that there is that possibility. That he could clearly. So this, it's clear from what we'll continue seeing later. I'm giving you a sneak peek that this is an assumption that he's willing to do it, but in a case where he states that he doesn't want to sell the rights, he could do that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, fantastic question. I liked it. Good. Yeah. All right. Anyone else?
What if the value is
The
actually
value of?
the value of the item, which was, let's say, loaned or rented to someone? What if the value was actually greater? For example, a cow,
Right.
female cow, but no one knew the cow was pregnant. The owner didn't know. The
Right.
borrower didn't know.
Great question. I think class 3 or 4 will touch on that.
Okay, now,
Yes.
cow was stolen.
Yes.
The ganef sells the calf or has to someone else.
Right.
He's caught by the police, said, here's the cow, just like it was. And then someone says, wait a minute, is that just like it was? It actually was a pregnant cow.
Yep.
It was a pregnant, I didn't know that. No one knew that. So who gets the benefit of it being pregnant? Does the ganef? Does the borrower? Does the owner?
Very good question. Class 4 or 3. You're beating me. You're beating the Talmud. What should I say? The Talmud gets into that. That's the beauty of the Talmud, that it's really it's a work in progress. So when you open it up, many times you could even touch on those topics because it's a discussion. So when you leave the room open for discussions, you really many times end up. So the Talmud deals precisely with such a case of a baby being born. Very good. So I think we're going to touch on that, which really goes through this idea of unknown financial benefits that might occur. Not just unpredictable, but unknown. Or not really unknown, that were there that you just weren't aware about it. Different than unpredictable. Or unknown, it was there, you just didn't know because. But so that will be, I believe, I believe the goal is to be for that for class 3, but we'll see if we that might end up being class 4. All right.
So can you repeat the concept that you were talking about where you could actually sell a financial interest without the object being present?
Like a modern day one?
Well, I think I can think of some modern day ones. I'm more interested in what were they thinking when that, if that is what, if I understood you correctly,
Yeah.
and what was the case when they came up with that concept then?
So this case, our Mishnah. And that's what I found fantastic about this Mishnah, is that our Mishnah doesn't say those words clearly. It doesn't say we are discussing financial rights. But when you read in the words, you see we're not discussing about selling an animal. We're discussing selling the rights of an animal.
Okay.
The financial rights without the cow existing. Because
Okay,
it was
got
stolen.
it. Okay.
And at
Okay.
the moment, and interestingly, it's not even where you bought it on purpose. It's like where
Right.
you sort of brought a product by mistake and then found out later that there was like, I don't know how that would work, but that there was like, this was really part of, I don't know, like you bought, I can't even, I think there's that added twist to that is that like, that you didn't even know, that you weren't even planning to buy those rights. And that itself isn't enough. But I found that fantastic. When I realized that in the Mishnah, I was like, wow. I was like telling my students, I took them on, I took a class on a journey of like, I just took them through like, like a basic economic, like, you bought a house and it went up in value, you bought a business, you bought a stock, and when it shot up, what does it have to do with our Mishnah? And I'm like, well, here it is. So you're wondering why we're learning about cows and vessels, but let me tell you, it's a reflection of today's economy.
Well, sure, because stocks are the obvious, in my mind, the modern example.
Yep.
And so this was actually them talking about specifics of what the commodities were in the day that the Mishnah was written down.
Yes. All right. I'm off. See you all next week, God willing. And meanwhile, happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy
Happy
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah. Thank you.
I'm
Thank
looking for
you.
the
Thank
continuation
you.
of
Happy
this course.
Hanukkah.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night. Good night. All right. Stop sharing.